Hello, it's April 8th. I'm Matthew Ogden with an LPAC news update. As we have developed in increasing depth in recent videos on this website, phenomena that we witness here on the Earth are inseparable from galactic processes. In fact, the most significant developments in the biosphere, the periods of both mass extinction and expanded speciation, are showing themselves to be directly tied to events on a galactic scale, occurring on an approximately 62 million year cycle as our solar system bobs up and down through the galactic plane. As we move once again into the galactic regions which have been responsible for such events in the past, we must ask ourselves, why are we, as cognitive human beings, not monitoring these processes? Why instead are we actively dismantling and taking down our capability to do so? We have clear evidence that the recent earthquakes are directly tied to anomalies in our ionosphere and show a strong statistical correlation to events on the Sun. Such hard evidence is being presented this week at a major scientific conference in Vienna by scientists such as Pier Francesco Biaggi and others. Yet, as we speak, there are no federally funded projects which are seriously dedicated to studying and investigating this connection, research which we know would save countless lives. 10 days ago, in the wake of the disastrous earthquake and tsunami in Japan, Lyndon LaRouche called for the launching of what he dubbed Operation Kepler, an international partnership among sovereign nations for the consolidation of a design for a global array of space-based and ground-based monitoring devices for the measurement and tracking of a vast array of unseen processes, which would provide the scientists with the ability to predict and foresee impending earthquakes and other seismic activity. This program would be based on the method of scientific insight demonstrated by Johannes Kepler in his The Harmonies of the World, in which he utilized the contradiction between the images of the universe provided by two different human sense organs, in his case sight and sound, which gave him the ability to discover the unseen principle of universal gravitation. A modern-day Operation Kepler would extend this method of scientific discovery into the vast array of extended sensory instruments which mankind has the power to develop, to see processes which are completely invisible to our 5 biological senses. By triangulating between these artificial senses, all tracking different proven earthquake precursors, both terrestrial and extraterrestrial, and interpolating from the contradictions which arise between them, mankind would be able to derive a view of reality completely unseen by any of the individual measuring instruments from among the complex composing this globally extended sensorium. A mobilization of the magnitude and scientific scope which would be required to put Operation Kepler into effect is only equal in its scale and global reach to what Lyndon LaRouche called for over 3 decades ago with what became known as the Strategic Defense Initiative, or the SDI. And it's precisely the same sort of revolutionary strategic shift which was associated with the SDI then that will be required today to implement the scientific and political revolution known as Operation Kepler. As Lyndon LaRouche has identified it recently, an end to the so-called balance of power, the imperially induced competition and conflict between and among separate nations, and instead the creation of a new global system of post-empire global cooperation among a community of perfectly sovereign but mutually collaborating nation-states, both large nations and small, each dedicated to the achievement of what was dubbed by the scientist Edward Teller back in the days of the SDI, the common aims of mankind. Since Lyndon LaRouche initiated his call for this global scientific and political collaboration for earthquake precursor monitoring and prediction, a significant proposal for moving in that direction in the form of pulling together a consolidated global monitoring system by integrating the technologies that are already in place, was proposed by Anatoly Perminov, the director of the Russian Federal Space Agency, during an interview that he just conducted on April 4th. In this interview, Perminov proposes what he calls an international global aerospace monitoring system, which would pool all the separate data now being collected by different space agencies in different nations into one collective resource center, which would then allow all nations involved in the project to have access to the full scope of what any given nation is detecting in terms of earthquake precursors and similar processes. Perminov includes in this monitoring program the study of distant galaxies and star clusters, which have a big effect on what occurs here on Earth. Here's what Perminov had to say. I have in mind a security system, a warning system. It is called the International Global Aerospace Monitoring System. Each spacefaring nation possesses different data, depending on the satellites they use for remote sensing and for meteorological research. We are proposing that these nations put their data in processing centers, and that these centers be located on different continents, in North America, South America, Africa, Asia, and Europe. Based on the data received in the centers, recommendations would be made to world leaders. In addition, there are small, poorer countries that do not have their own space vehicles and satellites and such things. At the same time, it is often these countries that are afflicted by floods and earthquakes, Indonesia, for example. In fact, the information would be useful for other countries. All the data will be processed in the computer centers and supplied to every country in the form of risk warnings, saying, for example, that an earthquake hazard will be high in several places around the globe in the course of the next 2 weeks. In that way, mankind will be prepared for an earthquake. Notification may also touch upon what is happening in distant galaxies. It's possible that stars concentrated there will produce an impact on Earth. Or in 4 years, some asteroid will approach the Earth within a distance of 200 kilometers. That would be a very serious threat. Precisely such information is, in fact, what governments need, rather than just telemetry from a spacecraft that is of no use to them. Therefore, we are proposing to create such a global monitoring system. At the moment, China and NASA are seriously considering joining this project. I don't like to use the word saving mankind, but we do need such a system to warn us about potential such threats. Every time I talk to somebody and explain why we need such a system, everybody supports the idea. The specific program which Perminov is referring to is called IGMASS, or the International Global Monitoring Aerospace System. It was originally conceived of by academicians within the Russian Academy of Sciences, who describe it as a program for the global monitoring of Earth's surface, Earth's atmosphere, and near-Earth environment from space, with the possibility to transfer observation data to ground situation centers, which carry out forecast and warning in quasi-real time to prevent natural and man-made disasters. According to the program's website, the major tasks of IGMASS include the remote observation of Earth's surface, atmosphere, and ionosphere with the use of visible and heat range equipment, low and high-frequency wave complexes, complexes for monitoring of charged particles, magnetometers, mass analyzers, and spectrometers. Global geological mapping of various Earth materials, of folded and discontinuous structures, and dynamic control of seismic areas, and the detection of signs of future earthquakes, including by the measuring of the movement of tectonic plates and monitoring of various signs of earthquakes and volcanic processes, along with the monitoring of the beginning, development, and distribution of tornadoes, typhoons, tsunamis, cyclones, and anticyclones. The website goes on to say that IGMASS would include both space-based and ground-based detection systems, describing the orbital segment as monitoring the thermal, magnetic, and gravitational fields and plasma in the ionosphere and detecting changes in the ozone layer and the atmosphere. It would also detect geodynamic transformations in Earth's crust and hydrodynamic fluctuations in underground waters, which could be forerunners of natural and man-made disasters. The IGMASS program has been presented to the United Nations and also to the Chinese government this year. Perminov also hints that people at NASA are supportive and are considering a collaboration. In all, a total of 23 countries have already agreed to come on board, including Australia, Argentina, and Indonesia, with some very significant collaboration among former Soviet countries such as Ukraine. One of the crucial responsibilities that these nations would take up is the development of internationally coordinated mass evacuation and relocation capabilities, unlike anything we've ever done before. Temporarily relocating whole cities will require satellite monitoring of escape routes and a logistical coordination effort on the scale of mobilization for a world war. This proposal from Perminov, from his position as the head of Roscosmos, for the implementation of a top-down cooperative organization of mankind's space-based global sensorium through the initiation of the IGMASS program, comes at the same time, however, that Barack Obama is waging a full-out offensive against the critical monitoring satellite systems and the manned space program generally inside the United States. If we do not immediately remove Obama from office now, under the provisions of Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, as Lyndon LaRouche has called for, not only will the United States preparedness capability be completely dismantled at the very period that the west coast of our country is being menaced with the spreading plague of 9.0 earthquakes or greater, but the very capability of the world to organize itself in opposition to the global empire which wishes to prevent this type of scientific progress will be lost. Only through the removal of Obama and the implementation of the Glass-Steagall legislation will the United States recover its ability to lead such a global cooperation for the achievement of the common aims of mankind. From the standpoint of consolidating the full Operation Kepler, the IGMASS proposal is an excellent step in the right direction, though certainly not the full thing. What we really need is an expansion of the monitoring of all of the Sun-Earth phenomena and a constant monitoring of other celestial objects, such as the Crab Nebula or even Jupiter. As the situation stands now, we have telescopes which can only look at one object at a time. We should also have sensors on at least Mars and the Moon to compare earthquake phenomena here on Earth with the seismic activity there. Ultimately, we need the same thing on all bodies in our solar system, such as the moons of Jupiter, Saturn, the asteroids, and so forth. Though IGMASS doesn't stretch that far by any means yet, the mere act linking up all of the existing devices that we have operational now is the first step, as well as putting up the new nanosatellites that they're proposing. We find ourselves now approaching the 50-year anniversary of man's first spaceflight, when the Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin successfully conducted a 108-minute complete orbit of the globe on April 12, 1961. Last night, 3 astronauts, 2 Russian and 1 American, docked with the International Space Station on a special mission timed to celebrate in orbit this half-century anniversary of man's first foray off of our planet. As U.S. astronaut Ron Garan, one of the crew of the 3 aboard the Soyuz spacecraft which carried the astronauts into space, said of Gagarin's historic flight, "His accomplishment was a giant leap in our evolution as a species. With Gagarin's flight, humanity became a different species. Humanity was no longer bounded to the confines of the Earth. Gagarin's name is a symbol of the conquest of space, a symbol of the dreams of generations of people to fly from our planet beyond the bound of what is possible." It is in the spirit of this historic accomplishment, man's first entry to space nearly 50 years ago today, a willful evolutionary step towards the galactic identity of our species, that we must affirm in ourselves the nature of the human race. The choice is now before us to make another such voluntary evolutionary leap by dedicating ourselves to the creation of an expanded sensorium, as Lyndon LaRouche's Operation Kepler defines it, allowing us, first, to exert willful control over predicting and mitigating the destructive effects of earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, and the like, and, eventually, to developing the power and understanding to control and ultimately prevent them. Stay tuned for more. If you haven't already, watch Lyndon LaRouche's appearance on the LPAC Weekly Report last Wednesday, along with 2 members of the LPAC